Okay, and let's begin. Welcome to our transcontinental webinar with Guess the Test and Zuko Form Analytics. Thanks for attending today. So first up, a brief intro of what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to take you through some A/B tests, sort of live A/B tests from Guess the Test's database, taking you through those. It's going to be an interactive session. There's going to be a little bit of a poll as to which of the variants you thought won, and we're going to use that to kind of kick off and stimulate discussions about individual forms and elements of forms, and how you can learn from that to help optimize your own forms. Bit of housekeeping. So we will be sharing the slides and the video, so no need to take any notes if you don't want to. Also, if you could drop any questions into the Q&A and we'll answer them. We've got a session allocated for that at the end. So first off, hello as well, and in terms of who we are, I'm Alan. I'm the Managing Director of Zuko Analytics. I've also got my colleague Lena here. For those of you who don't know Zuko, we are a form analytics platform. So we provide data kind of telling you when, where, and why users drop out of forms so you can optimize your forms. We also have associated consultancy services with that. So as you might be able to tell, we do a lot with forms. So it was great to be able to partner with Guess the Test and Deborah to look at a form specific session. I'll now hand you over to Deborah, who will introduce herself and Guess the Test, and then we'll get cracking with the day's business.
Sounds great. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's session. It's going to be a fun and really exciting session, as Alan said. It's going to be interactive, so you're going to be able to take your best guess on the feature test that we're going to go through, see if you win, and then find out the results and apply the real-life findings to optimize your own success. Just in case you don't know who I am or you haven't heard of Guess the Test before, I'm a Google Analytics certified digital marketer. I have a Master's of Science degree with a specialization in eye tracking technology. And I founded Guess the Test, which is known as the go-to A/B test case study resource. And I've published hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of articles on conversion rate optimization and A/B testing. And there's hundreds of A/B test case studies on Guess the Test. And you get a little sneak preview into some of them today. They're all going to be form related. And we're going to look at ways that you can optimize your own forms. So how does that sound to everyone? Woo! All right, so let's get into it, looking at our first form test. So we're going to go through form length and offers, form placement, multi-step and progressive forms, form errors, and form and trust elements. So the first test looks at form length and offers. And when you hear this, you may be starting to conjure up some things about what that means to you. The question I want you to consider is, does shorter always win? So we've heard all these things, we've seen all this research. Shorter is best. You should only have one or max two form fields. Is that always the case? We're going to look at that and challenge that assumption and find out yes or no. So to do that, we're going to look at a real life A/B test. In this version, version A, you can see here we have a shorter form. Also, we have a coupon code. That was matched against a longer form with no coupon code. Now, before you go ahead and take your best guess, I'll just give you a little bit of info about the test so you can be informed going into your guess. The key performance indicator for this test was leads resulting from the form submissions. So they were trying to get more people to fill out the form. And it was a paid search audience, people who were typing in specifically the shop for what is an auto decaler. They create decals for trucks and stickers for trucks to brand the trucks. And people were searching for this. They were local, small and medium-sized businesses in targeted cities in the US. And the organization that ran the test was Reap Marketing, a digital marketing agency, but it was done for their client, Thomas Printworks, which is a 60-year-old printing company. As I mentioned, they do large-scale color graphics like vehicle wraps and billboards and skyscrapers and banners. And what's so interesting about this test is that because they're such an old established company, they really had to find new and progressive digital marketing ways to attract a new audience. So the question was, should we use a shorter form and a coupon code to attract more people to fill out the form? Or should we go with a longer form and no coupon code, but maybe make some of these forms a little bit more targeted? So version A, shorter, less fields and coupon code. Version B, longer, but more targeted fields. So I'd like you now to go ahead and take your best guess. There's a poll that you should see up on your screen, and you can guess version A, shorter plus coupon code, or version B, longer, no coupon code.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, votes still coming in. So,
and Alan, what are people saying? What's kind of the general?
I don't want to bias. I don't want to peak too early in this test. We've got to wait till we.
That's right. No peaking.
Once it ends, I shall publish the poll, and we can see which one wins. Well, okay. So I think we've probably got people stop getting voting. So let's end poll and share results. So hopefully everyone can see that now. Can you see that?
Okay, great. I can, yes. So a whopping 71% are going with the traditional shorter plus coupon code. Makes eminent sense. Why on earth would you have a longer form and no coupon code? Who the heck would fill that out? Or 30% are saying version B, longer form, no coupon code. Why would anyone go with that? What is the correct answer? Dun, 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 drum roll. The answer is version B. So congratulations to all of those 30% of you who guessed version B. You guessed the right test. Now, what is going on here? Why on earth would anyone fill out a longer form with no coupon code? Well, let's look at this and dissect it a little bit. So there was actually 3 variants in total. There was one with a 10% off coupon code, a 25% off coupon code, and then the version you saw with no coupon code at all. To run this test, they split traffic 3 ways. They ran the test for 6 weeks, and they achieved 140% lift in form-filled completions by cutting out the coupon code and making the form longer. Now you may be kind of scratching your head here. What's going on? Before we go into the analysis part of it, I do want to let you know there was no sample size reported, so results potentially are a little suspect or not fully trustworthy, but they do indicate that the longer form won. Now, there is a problem with this test, and I see in the comments that Ronnie hinted at it a little bit. They didn't isolate the variable of form length without the coupon code. So they just looked at form length and coupon code, or form length without the coupon code. But they should have had a variable of coupon code isolated by itself. Yeah. So this test is not immune to error.
Yeah, and I think we see it a lot when we're looking at e-commerce checkouts in particular. You can see a coupon code, it just drives abandonment or people moving away straight away, because what's the first thing you see when there's a big coupon code? Right, there must be one out there. So here you go. I think Ronnie shared a link there as well, and it's kind of what we see. It just drives people away, and especially if you don't execute it well, because and especially if you don't have any coupons, because people will go away searching for a coupon that doesn't exist and then just go, well, there must be one out there. I'll wait till I'll get one, or they'll assume you'll email them with it. So it's a big one.
Exactly.
But like you said, I think it is important, to isolate these if you're going to go do a pure like for like.
Definitely, really great points. So coupon codes can cause abandonment. That's definitely one issue. But one of the things that went on here is that the form fields themselves were actually far more relevant for prospects looking to get an actual quote for a car wrap here. And so they didn't mind filling out the longer form because it gave them much more targeted information that honed in on exactly what they were looking for. And so when we think about that and we extract it into our own tests, what we find is that the optimal form length isn't always shorter is better. This finding doesn't always hold true universally. And I think that's a really important finding for digital marketers who are interested in testing, because we sometimes beat ourselves up and say, we have to get this form shorter. It's looking too long. Well, according to some research, the optimal number of form fields to display is actually 5 to 7 form fields. And that's what will establish a sense of trust and credibility with your audience when they see that number of form fields. Now, of course, you have to test it for yourself before you implement it, but longer is okay on the caveat that those form fields are relevant for your audience. So what really seems to matter is the relevancy of the form fields and their friction level. If you are going to ask for higher friction information, like a phone number, you should probably explain why you need that phone number, or conversions could drop. And you want to be obtaining information that's going to bring your lead or your prospect one step closer in your funnel to being able to deliver the information that they want.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, Alan.
Well, I'll let you finish your point, and then there's a couple of points I'd like to build on there.
Definitely. So the other thing is, as we saw, and as you and Ronnie mentioned, discounts don't always win, and they can in fact send users away from completing the form. And worst case, they can even create a bottom line loss because you're giving the discount. So as a net sum from this test, I think the important information that our audience should be taking away today is, if you ask for relevant information that helps users achieve their needs, like specific quote request data, conversions can increase even if the form is longer. So relevancy really seems to be key.
Yeah, and so kind of to build on that, it's partly to do with relevance, but there can be other factors at play as well. So I'll give you an example. So we at Zuko, we have data on thousands of forms, and we've created some benchmarking data which you can access on our website. But one of the interesting things on it is, okay, we look at number of form fields, and you can plot that against the conversion rates. And overall, if you plot a conversion rate, there is no direct correlation, interestingly enough. And there's certain things get thrown out of it because we've split the data as well by sector. And the sector which has by far the highest conversion rate is local government. But also it's the sector which has by far the longest forms. There can be up to 100 individual questions on those forms. They're crazy. And if you look at them, they look terrible. And you normally say, well, that will have a terrible conversion rate. But actually, what's the factor at play? Well, the factor at play is local government. They've got a monopoly on the service they're providing, typically. So you have no other option. So and also there tends to be high motivation to complete. There's no reason to drop out and go elsewhere because you've got no alternative. So you see that, and you see the conversion rates are huge, which is perhaps the incentive why people don't spend much time making them more optimal, because they've got high conversion rates, which is an interesting dynamic. But you can see that, and you can see that across others. Whereas in the automotive sector, they've got terrible conversion rates. So it's quite an interesting thing to look at what's at play. And then also, so just on another of your points, high friction information on phone numbers. Phone number is one that we see consistently puts customers off, consistently across pretty much any form. Sometimes that's to do with the UI or the UX because you're executing it badly, but also often it's like, well, expectations. Why do you want my phone number? Particularly in e-commerce, they've provided an email address, they've provided their physical address. Well, why do you need a phone number? I'm not giving you that. You're just going to call me up and hassle me. So like you say, you need to explain it. And so there's research on that from the Baymard Institute I've seen as well. Phone number is a high friction field often. But as I say, taking it back to the form length, there's lots of things to play. And it's, we'd never say there's an optimal number of fields because there's a general rule. If you don't need to ask something, don't ask it now, if you can get away with that. But yeah, like you said, you need to test it to be sure for your sector and your purposes.
Okay, that's great advice. And relevancy, do you find?
Yeah, no, it's relevancy. So why are you asking? And I know there's studies about this in terms of actually sometimes if you ask a relevant question, it's better to have a longer form because you gain that credibility. I think, like you said, you know, if you're asking for a loan and you're asking them their name and email address, and they come back and say give you a loan or credit card, and people are like, oh, well, hang on a sec. But if you ask them enough relevant questions, you build on that, you'll see your conversion rate increase. But up to a point, obviously, if people don't like keep answering the same questions or similar questions again and again and again, depending on their motivation, depending on what they believe or perceive the information that you need, and therefore the implied deal, they give the information, you give them the service or good or whatever it may be.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, thanks for adding that. Fantastic. So we're going to move on from form length to form placement. And we're going to examine the question, where is the optimal place to put a form? And is left actually best? So this is an interesting study where after listening to a webinar, much like this one, the testing team at Windward, they're a software company, they were told in the webinar, test everything, embrace the test everything approach, and don't listen to the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. And they said, well, hey, what happens if we take our existing form on the right side of the page and we put it on the left side of the page? Will it affect conversions? Will it help? Will it bring down conversions? What's going to happen? They said, well, let's test it, as any good testing team would do. So for this test, their goal was to increase form submission rates and free trial downloads. It was organic search and referral traffic on the download free trial page. Anyone who was coming to the page were users interested in a free trial. And as I mentioned, it was by Windward Studios, so they do reporting software and data solutions. So what do you think? Is left best, or does it actually drag down conversions? Where should you place your form? And if we want to bring up our poll, people can take their best guess. So version A, left side, or version B, right side?
Okay, we'll leave a few more seconds for people to get your vote in now if you haven't already. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's end the poll and share the results.
All right, so pretty no clear definitive answer, but people are definitely leaning towards the right side at 58%. Just 42% think left side. So what is the answer? What is the right answer to this test? Did you guess the right test? If you guessed version A, left side, you guessed the right test. So congratulations to the 42% of you who did indeed guess version A. This is a surprising test, and we're going to go through the rationale of why left side may actually indeed be better. In this test, it created a 30.8% lift in form submissions. Traffic was split 50-50. The test ran for 60 days at 95% confidence, but unfortunately no sample size or conversion figures were reported, so we can't fully validate this information, but it does suggest that left side may be best. Now, just anecdotally, I've seen this test run many times, or have ran it myself many times. It has about a 7 out of 10 win rate. So 7 times it's going to win, 3 times it won't. That's pretty good for a test. If you can get a 1 in 3 win rate, you're doing excellent. And 7 out of 10 times, or 70% of the times, if it can win, then you're golden. So this actually seems to be a replicatable pattern that you might want to try for yourself. And the rationale of why this may work, well, it seems to be in line with reading patterns. So I mentioned I have a master's degree specialized in eye tracking technology. These are eye tracking heat maps. And what they do is they look at how the eye reads on a screen. And there's a certain letter that emerges as we land on the screen and scan across and scan down. And this is known as the F-shaped pattern. This F-shaped pattern seems to be how people in general read on websites. Now, it is task dependent, so your reading behavior is going to change based on the task you've been given or the goal you're trying to accomplish on the website. But overall, this F-shaped pattern persists, and we actually spend about 70% of the time looking at the left side of the screen, as you can see in these heat maps, and just only about 30% looking at the right side of the screen. And that's according to the Nelson-Norman group. So what's happened over time, it's hypothesized, is that because we have this F-shaped reading pattern and so much attention is spent on the left side of the screen, we've actually started to become blind to the right side of the screen, because that is exactly where we expect banner ads to appear. So we avert our eyes from the right side of the screen because we don't want to be serve these ads and responding to them. And we tend to stay on the left side of the screen, plus our reading patterns in English language anyway, make it so that that F-shaped pattern persists. So given those two factors, we've developed banner blindness, and we look at the left side of the screen inherently. It seems that it actually may be best to test the effect of putting your forms on the left side of the screen, because number one, they'll fall in line with the reading patterns and they'll be seen more visibly and more quickly. And number two, they won't be ignored because of banner blindness. Ellen, do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, we don't have specific data on this in Zuko, because typically the Outform Analytics doesn't pick that up unless you do a specific A/B test. But it's interesting. I note that a lot of some of the landing page companies, as a default, put the form on the right for a lot of their templates. And actually, is that actually right? And I noted on our own website, we have, a number of them where the form is on the right hand side next to the copy on the left, because we assume the copy is most important. They look there, but then actually, is that affecting your conversion rate? So I might just have to switch some of ours over and see what goes on. So in terms of that, so we don't have any specific data, but there's some interesting points I was also going to make. I think Ronnie's made it as well. Does the pattern hold for other languages where it's not necessarily left to right, or there's different conventions? For instance, in Japan, Ronnie's mentioned Hebrew and Arabic as an example. So I think it's an interesting one, and I say I'm gonna test it out some more, although I don't have any detailed insight, because it's not something I've specifically looked at myself before.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what we do know is that it's validated in English language. We don't have enough research, or I haven't come across any research anyway that shows in other languages. I imagine that it would hold true, but the opposite, but it does need to be tested. And then there was also a question about, was this on desktop and mobile, or just desktop? This test itself was run just on desktop. On mobile, the form tends to kind of get squished into the middle, so it's generally harder to test on mobile. But certainly segmenting your audience by desktop and mobile is always a good thing to be doing.
Okay.
All right. So keeping in mind banner blindness and the F-shaped pattern, we're going to go to a question that I think a lot of people have on their mind, which is, well, what kind of form should I be using? Should I use a multi-step or a single-step form? And is multi-step actually better? So let's look at that. So here we have a multi-step form. Step 1 and step 2, the information was simply broken down into 2 steps. And in version B here, we have a single step form, same information, but it appeared in 1 step, and the user could scroll down the screen to fill out the form. I'll give you a little bit of info about this test before you dive in. So the goal, of course, was form submissions, and they're trying to increase registration signups. The traffic was organic, and the audience was software users. And this was run for a financial planning and software provider called Adaptive Insights. So the question again was, should you use a multi-step or a single step form? Which converts better? And if you want to go ahead and take your best guess, the poll is now live.
Okay, we'll leave that for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's end that poll.
All right. And so we have a pretty clear pulling ahead for multi-step. 62% of you think that multi-step is the way to go. 38% of you think single step. Now, I've thrown some curveballs at you these first couple tests. I've given surprising results. And now we're going to reveal the answer and show that multi-step indeed does seem to be the way to go. And it's not just with this test. This finding has been validated with many, many other tests run. Of course, you always want to test for yourself. But in this test, splitting it into multi-step lifted form submissions, a whopping 30%. This was a split test run with 50-50 traffic over 23 days and 95% confidence. Unfortunately, no sample size or actual conversion figures are reported. So, there may be some issues with this test, but it's a finding I think that can be extracted, and we can see that multi-step can be really beneficial, at least as something to test and see if it works for you. Because, Alan, as I'm sure you know, according to Zuko, 68.3% of users who view a form will start it, but only 45% will finish it. So that's about a 23% drop-off rate. Now, that does vary by industry. And you were telling us earlier, government forms, as complicated as they are, they tend to have shorter, I was gonna expand that form. They tend to have shorter drop-off rates because people are so high intent and there's not a lot of competition. But registration forms have one of the lowest completion rates. Are you able to tell us about that?
Yes, there are. I mean, sometimes that's an issue with the fact you're putting on a page with lots of things and people interact with like a contact form or registration form. So I think it's kind of often low intent. People kind of go into it, play around with it, but you've not got them at a certain stage of the purchase funnel, so they don't convert. Obviously, although it varies by industry, certainly. In terms of the multi-step things that you looked at, it's just to echo what you've said. Pretty much across all our forms that we've seen, and I think every study I've ever seen, bar one, converting from a single step to a multi-step form, except in the cases where it's literally 3 fields, sees an improvement in conversion. I just yesterday was looking at a US based loan application form which had about 100 questions on one page. It was like, crikey. You can just see the extreme that actually how it does put people off. It's just suddenly information overload, and they drop out straight away before they even get halfway through the form.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think the name of the game here really is to make the form appear shorter with the multi-step. And when you do that, I think anyway, you can confirm this, but what you're doing is you're getting the micro conversion. You're getting the user a little bit more invested and committed each step along the way. They've divulged some of their details. Now you're asking them for more details. They're like, oh, I don't really want to give this, but okay, I just gave my name and email address. What's my phone number now at this point? And each step along the way, there's that micro conversion. So that ultimate macro conversion of form completions is easier to achieve. You've sort of spoon-fed them little nibbles along the way until they finally do convert. Does that concur with what you think?
Yes, and also if you look at a lot of the psychology around it, the principles of consistency, people start something, they're much more likely to finish it, which is one of those little things. Like once you've invested the time, it's like fallacy of sunk costs. People are like, well, I've already spent 3 minutes filling out these 2 sections, I'll just finish this last one, and all of that. Whereas if they saw the length at the start, they wouldn't even jump in. Right. So certainly, and I noticed actually just a question from Katie. What are your thoughts on collapsible steps on particularly long forms? We've seen that work well. Obviously, you've got to manage expectations. Collapsible steps. you don't want to be hitting people with things they don't expect. It's best that you manage their expectations up front. So whether that's with a progress bar or just telling them the sort of things they're going to need to provide, or give them an expectation and time. Otherwise, you run the risk of the step is revealed and then they jump off because it just looks too daunting. But we have seen those work well. They're kind of like a multi-step in a way, but it's just a different way of executing it.
And I think you mean this kind of thing, I was calling it a progressive form, but I guess collapsible form would be another way.
Yeah,
you
it
show
depends
the
on
first
the
initial form fields, and then somebody hits the button and the remaining form fields drop down.
Something like that. Often you see that on a single page application. It just drops in. Also, because often it's conditional as well, because actually you don't want to be showing people questions you're never going to ask them. So you ask, yes or no, and then if they go down pathway 1, they get certain questions, and pathway 2, they get other questions. So it's a good way of keeping things relevant as well, which is a good way of often cutting down. You may have a long form. You can often obviate the need for them to have to answer certain questions, which improves the user flow.
Right. Okay, makes sense. Now, I do want to tell everyone out there, this is not a new idea, so I'm certainly not going to try and take credit for it myself. In fact, when I posted something on LinkedIn, Alan and I had a conversation a little while back, and one of our contacts said, "Oh my God, I was testing this 15 years ago." So this is not a new idea, but it's, as a result, a pattern that's been validated over and over and over again. Alan, you said you've hardly ever seen it lose.
Yeah.
According to Good UI, it works about 80% of the time. So that's a really strong win rate. So we have form on the left working about 70% of the time. That's validated over dozens to hundreds of studies, and this is also validated over dozens of studies, maybe hundreds, where 80% of the time it's going to work for you. So it's a good bet to start with testing.
Yeah.
And in addition to trying a multi-step form, I think progressive form is certainly worth testing against and seeing if that actually is better for your user. And I've pulled an example here where when you fill in this last form field, the rest of the form drops down. And it's a little bit trickier for the user because they're like, oh, now I have more to fill out. Oh man. But as you said, Alan, they've already invested that time and that commitment, and now they want to see it through to completion.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that Ronnie makes as well in the comments, that actually the factor whether the form is optional or mandatory. Mandatory forms such as one-page checkout, Amazon single forms are big winners, which may very well be true. I've not seen any data for that, so it'd be good to see anything on that. But I could see that could potentially be true, because actually if they have to do it, you might as well get it over and done with in one go. Particularly if it's a checkout, you're probably not going to be asking too many things of them. Particularly if you're someone like Amazon who's probably got a lot of that data stored, you can kind of cut out some of the stuff they need to do.
Definitely. That's great. All right, so from multi-step forms to form errors. So this is something that a lot of digital marketers don't think about. Why on earth would I need to test how my form displays an error message? I mean, that's lame. I want to get them to convert on the form. I'm not going to spend all my time optimizing the form errors, but it's actually really important. It's overlooked, and it can make a huge difference in conversions. And for the obvious reason that if the user can't fill out the form, they can't convert on it. So when it comes to form error displays, what converts best? So here we have an example of 2 form error display messages, one with red boxes and text directly under the box if there was an error in the form field or the filling out of the form. There was also a box up here that showed where the errors were. In this version, the errors were all displayed in kind of like an anchor text format, and the red box was highlighted, or the cell was highlighted. So before you take your best guess, I'll just give you a little bit more information. The KPI was clearly form submissions. They were trying to increase user signups by making the form errors easier to spot and therefore correct. The audience was direct search, organic, paid, social, and an existing email list. And this was for Energy Australia, which is an electricity and gas provider in Australia. So these were people who we're consuming Energy Australia gas products. So based on that information, which form error display do you think won? The red boxes and text, version A, or version B with the cell highlight? So go ahead and take your best guess.
Right, 2 more seconds. 2, 1.
All right, and so we're pretty close. We have kind of up in the air here. 54 think version A with the red boxes, and 46% of you think version B with the cell highlights. So let's see. Dun, 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 dun. If you guessed version A, congrats, you guessed the right test. So having the red boxes and the text directly below resulted in a 16.76% uplift in form submissions. So basically correcting the error, really pinpointing where the error was for the user and making it so that they could not fix it, had a huge impact on form submissions. There was 2,000 unique visitors per variant. The traffic was split 50-50 and the test was run for 19 days. The result achieved 99.9% confidence, but again, unfortunately, no actual conversion figures were reported, and the sample size was a bit small. It may have been too small to really truly get significant results. The other thing with this test you should note is that there was multiple changes between the forms, so it's hard to isolate any one specific variable. Ideally, they would have tested it so that it was just the form error display, but they changed things around a little bit. You can see that if you compare them closely. But if we extract this, and assuming the data is indeed trustworthy, this shows us that making form error messages really obvious so the user can't do anything but fix the error and knows exactly where to go to fix the error can be really helpful. And as I said when we started, form error display messages are amazing testing and optimization opportunity that most people just aren't thinking about because they're so focused on getting people to fill out the form. And when you think about it, if you think of yourself as a user, the only thing more frustrating than not being able to complete the form is not knowing where the errors are when you try and fill out the form in the first place and being able to fix them. So when you help users confidently and quickly fix the errors and spot them and know exactly where they are, then that can really help improve conversions. Ellen, do you have any thoughts or additional information?
So well, first thing I'd probably say about both of those executions, I would say they're probably both pretty terrible in terms of error messages. The main reason being that actually they're triggering on submit, which is an issue, but also they are not that easy to find. I think if you see they've got all the stuff at the top, which is terrible user experience. They have to scroll back up to the top to see what's going on. Obviously, I think the reason version A performed better is it's slightly easier to see where there's an issue than on version B. So big red box, okay, go there. But as I say, they're all triggering at once. One of the things, probably the most thing that we see most consistently improve form conversion rates is getting the validation of error messages right, which I think you've got an image there of some inline validation, and there's some discussion in the chat about that. There's a famous study that showed it improved conversion rates by 22%, and that's kind of in line what we typically see if you move to inline validation. So you validate the error, not immediately, but as soon as they move the focus from one field to the next, so you go, okay, yeah, this is correct, or this is you need to amend it if there's an error, because what you consistently see if you look at any sort of user studies is when you click a button and you get a big page worth of red, it's just terrible experience and potentially much more likely to cause a form of abandonment than just telling people as they go along, oh, perhaps you need to add a special character here, or you know, are you sure you meant this, or whatever. And that's a much better user experience, and you'll see much better conversion rates if you're doing that sort of error message timing and making sure it's like you say, making sure that the error message is obvious but also helpful and served at a timely time, if we can say that. Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. And what I like about the inline validation as well is you can positively reinforce the user's behavior in a, you know, a positive way. You're giving them credit for filling out the form correctly, rather than just saying, hey, you made a mistake, that's not right, you didn't fill out our form. You know, you're giving them props.
It reminds me of when I was at school. Yeah, you know, big red ink is bad. You've got that kind of seared into your brain from your school days. You don't like it.
Exactly. And you said inline validation like this, you've seen it work. You quoted a number.
22. Well, the study, the famous study, Luke Wroblewski, was 22% increase. And I say we see things around that sort of between 10 and 25% improvement in conversion rates just by sourcing out the error messages. Obviously, the caveat that is that the form is probably quite bad to start with because it was doing error messages incorrectly. So that's why you see the high uplift. Right. But it does show the power of just giving someone a better user experience and telling them telling them the error message at the best time.
Makes a lot of sense. So the takeaway here is, if you're not already testing form error messages, it's definitely something for you to consider, and try different ways of making that error message very apparent for the user, and potentially even giving positive reinforcement to keep that user motivated and happy. And inline form validation seems to be maybe one of the optimal ways.
Of course.
All right, and we're going to end today's talk with a question about form and trust elements. So trust elements are something that are near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time in research studying trust elements, and they can be effective when they're used in combination with forms. Now, we typically see trust elements in forms at the checkout stage, where we're really trying to reinforce a sense of trust and credibility and get that user to check out, give us our money. But do they work at other stages of the funnel too? And should you use them, or should you use them? Sorry, I'll say that again. Should you use them, or should you lose them? So let's explore that question with this test here, which looks at, it's a form submission for a downloadable resource. And in small little text here, just under the CTA button, it has a guarantee. And it says, we'll, you know, respect your privacy and your information. We won't spam you. In this version here, there's no guarantee. Now, does adding this small guarantee message actually evoke a sense of anxiety and get the user thinking about the trust and credibility of the website when they didn't even have that concern in the first place? Or does it provide reassurance? So that's the question I want you to keep in mind. I'll give you a little bit more info. This was with the goal of getting sign-up forms and increasing trust to get more signups. The traffic was all forms of traffic, and it was users who were interested in the platform Delivra, which is an email marketing automation platform, and in particular in downloading an ebook that was offered. So what are your thoughts? Is it better to use trust and credibility right below a form, or does it evoke a sense of anxiety and distrust? You can go ahead and take your best guess, version A with the guarantee or version B without the guarantee.
Okay, let's give that 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end this final poll and share the results.
Okay, all right. So a whopping 71% of you think that version 8 with the guarantee is the surefire way to go, and just 30% of you think without the guarantee. Well, let's see who guessed the right test. Dun, 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 dun. Version A! So congratulations to the 70% of you who correctly guessed with the trust elements was indeed the way to go, lifting form submissions 35%. So that's incredible. A simple line of text can offer that reassurance that the users need to know that their information is safe with you and to go ahead and actually submit the form. So in this study, traffic was split 50-50 and the test results achieved 99% confidence. Unfortunately, again, no actual conversion figures or sample size or testing time period were reported. So we're going to have to take the testing team's word for it that the results achieved were indeed what they say. But assuming trustworthiness of the study, what does this show us about using trust and credibility and forms together? To me, it shows that we should preemptively aim to ease anxiety. So a good digital marketer will anticipate what is going to cause their users anxiety and then address this pain point before the user even has the chance to object to it. And I think that's exactly what this test did. It said, okay, we know that giving your email address is going to be a sensitive issue to you. Don't worry about it. We've got you covered. You don't have to worry at all. And so it addressed the objections in a positive way. But you want to make sure when you're addressing objections that you don't create user anxiety the user doesn't already have. So don't bring up things like, spam and email address security if the user probably doesn't have those things in the first place. Another really good way to ease that anxiety is to be detailed and be concrete. Of course, you want to keep those statements short, but provide reassurance in a very concrete way. And when you're doing that, you don't want your message to ease anxiety to be so big that it takes away from the call to action. You want to make it nice and minimal. And in addition to that, there's lots of other great ways that you can test imbuing a sense of trust and credibility, not just on the checkout form, but on any form that your user might fill out, whether it's booking a demo or a squeeze page, that kind of thing. And you can do that potentially by testing the effect of using icons or trust badges, social proof, trust elements, and trust seals, and even something as simple as just having a little padlock icon and saying secure checkout in your CTA button. That's going to give your user a sense of trust and reassurance and sort of subconsciously provide the message that, hey, this is safe. You don't have to worry about it. And Alan and I have done a fair bit of research on trust symbols and forms together, and we've produced this article for you, which if we want to share it in the chat, it might be an interesting read for you, for those of you who are interested in learning more about trust seals and how you can use them with your forms.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. Again, it's one of those that we consistently see, just providing not as much as error messages, but we see nice little uplifts. If you go from 0 to something, you're going to often see the conversion rate increase. Although I don't know who coined it, but I learned it from you. As long as you don't do the old NASCAR effect of just spamming 20 symbols there, there's diminishing returns once you get past 2 or 3 typically, but especially if you've got a whole page of them, it can get a bit, well, hang on a sec. Me thinks the lady doth protest too much. So it's kind of, you've got to be careful with that, but we do see that, particularly around the credit card fields as well, at the points where people are most nervous about committing details. So like, as you mentioned, just having something around the credit cards field, just to give them that reassurance that they're not going to have their stuff stolen or whatever it may be that they're worried about.
Exactly, you got it. And
I'll just drop this in the chat shortly for the link to the article.
All right. So that's a wrap. That's what we have for you today. And we'd love to answer any questions or comments that you have.
So I think we've had some through. Lena was going to take us through them, but I think she might have dropped off. I know she's been having problems with her internet. I'm assuming it just crashed. But we do have some questions. The first one was from Karen about testing in mobile, which you've kind of answered already, I think. But then Will says, how limited are we in terms of changing form fields, i.e. Changing first name and last name to just name? Have you experienced with these sorts of tests before? I've got a few pieces on that, but I don't know if you've got anything, Deborah.
Changing form fields?
Well, just well, I suppose in terms of, I take this one to mean, okay, rather than having first name and last name, just making it just a single name field. I don't know if you've got any tests around that.
I don't specifically. My experience in testing and doing this for clients is that very often they have specific data that they need, and they'll have requirements. We absolutely can't cut out and combine first name, last name because we need the first name and we need the last name for our records or our software platform that we're using. And so I find clients tend to be very resistant to combining form fields, especially around name. But I have not actually tested it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We have the same experience in that people often, it's the wrong way around to do it, designing for your own database rather than for the user, obviously, goes without saying. And so we often see resistance around that. That said, if we had a blank sheet of paper, we recommend combining it to just name for various reasons. Some of it's cultural, because obviously the first name, last name is quite a Western, particularly Western European convention, but in other parts of the world, such as Asia, obviously the convention might be the other way around, or in Latin America, often, people have two or more surnames. So actually, what does that mean? So actually, we would always generally advise let people write their name as they would write it themselves, and then deal with it yourself to make the user experience as smooth as possible. That said, obviously, you say that doesn't always happen. I couldn't put a number on whether that actually improves conversion rates. I mean, from when I've seen it, as I don't have specific, robust data, it might make a minimal improvement, but nothing. It's not one of those things that users tend to be so used to that it's not enough for them to abandon on the name field, because it's usually one of the easiest things that they've got, even if it's slightly suboptimal format. If that makes sense. So one more question. I'm interested in interactions after filling out a form, thank you pages, etc. This is from Joseph. In your experience, is there opportunity for further conversion / content and micro conversions after a form has been filled out? I'll let you start with this one, Deborah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think absolutely. Once you've captured the user and their data, generally they're filling out a form to obtain something, whether that's a product or a service that they've just purchased from you, or an ebook that they're downloading, maybe a subscription to a newsletter, that kind of thing. So you definitely want to present to them whatever they've just completed the form for, but you have the opportunity, now that you've earned their trust and their contact information, to feed them even more of what you can offer them. So there's definitely micro conversion opportunities in that. Now, what it is will be dependent on what you're offering from a product or service standpoint, but there's definitely ways that you can optimize that process. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we don't have, again, specific data on this, because typically often our clients put into the form conversion once they've converted, either convert or don't convert, and that's the data they're looking at. But having said that, I've certainly seen it done well in terms of further conversion, because it's a similar principle to what we talked about with multi-step forms. Once you've completed, you've got that dynamic, you've got them. Do you want to capture them for something else? So just a pure example that we see from our own site. We've changed it slightly because we've ungated a lot of content, but we have an ebook on optimizing forms in general. Then we have white papers on, say, optimizing financial forms. So once someone's completed one, it's like, okay, well, you downloaded this, why don't you download the next one? And we see that, there's, pretty high conversion rate from people going, okay, I've committed once, I'm going to commit again, particularly if you make it low friction. So say when we used to gate it, then they've given you your details, don't ask them for the details again, that just annoys them. So either pre-fill or just take them directly through to the download. So that's just a personal experience, but I've also seen it done quite well in things like signing up to newsletters, etc. So that stuff's pretty that can work. So yeah, I think there are opportunities. So in terms of, those are the main questions. There are some questions in the chat I've noticed. Firstly, Andy's asked, late joiners, will you share the recording? Yes, we will. So that will be sent out to you. So we will do that. Also, Karen has asked about, can you add the link to this chat, the article by you and Deborah? I think it's in, I did drop it in there, but what I'll do is on the email, we have a number of specific articles on topics covered. So I'll include that in the follow-up emails to everyone. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to come through to me directly on LinkedIn or alan@zuko.io, and more than happy to take you through that. So, are there any more questions out there? Anyone want to drop any questions in the Q&A or the chat? If not, then we'll wind this up. Okay, looks like there isn't. So we'll wind this up just to say that both GuessTheTest and Zuko's website have a lot of content around form optimization. Obviously, in GuessTheTest's case, obviously a lot of more general A/B testing, not just forms. Where Zuko, we focus on forms, so there's a lot of data and information there. So feel free to check those out, or if you have any questions, you can come through to either of us. Again, with the follow-up, we'll give you all the details. So yeah, but I don't know if you've got anything to finish with, Deborah.
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to attend. It's been great to have you. And it looks like from the comments that people enjoyed the session. So I'm really glad to hear that, and feel free to be in touch if you do have any specific questions. Perfect. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much. We'll wind that up now, and you'll be able to access the recordings in the next day or so.